Howdy all. We are back after the July 4th holiday, and have to say, I've always loved July 4th, but it's really getting to be an ordeal now to go and watch fireworks. In Buffalo, they have a fireworks display down on the waterfront, and the waterfront in Buffalo is the area where there's a lot of renewal going on. A lot of Russ, you've been there a bunch of times for the combine. The downtown area is being revitalized. But last night, I have some friends who live in the area of the waterfront, and the cops had already cordoned off like basically a square mile because there were so many people down there, and I had to reconnoiter my way back roads to get to my friend's place. But it was so ridiculous, not only because everybody was down there, but they've started charging to go into a certain area, and so everybody else is, the people who are cheap are staying outside of that area and standing on the roads, so everything is clogged. It's getting to be. It used to be you just go to a park and they would have fireworks displays, and now it's just a big mess.
Look, it's great if you have kids. I've been to more than a few. I've been out on the bridge in New York. That was great. I've seen it in a lot of different places. These days, I more or less comfort my dogs. I don't really even go and search them out anymore.
And that's the funny thing. My friends, like I said, live downtown, and it's an apartment complex that was converted from an old school, I believe. And a lot of the residents have pets. And when the booming fireworks happen, every dog barking like crazy, every cat scurrying for cover. Yeah, people don't realize that it really has a traumatic effect on animals.
Oh yeah.
So, but anyway, it's nice to see fireworks, but it's not that. Let's just say it's not so much of a big thing that you have to just. I mean, I'm at the point now where I don't care. I just would rather just go someplace and have a fire pit and talk with some friends and not worry about damn fireworks. But anyway.
I joked with a buddy of mine last night, if you can get it on a TV with virtual reality, you don't have to go anymore.
Well, I don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
You don't have to go chasing it. I mean, friends of mine know their town does a lot of it, and it's all over. Usually some guys do it down the block, and the guy wasn't there yesterday. So they literally went to 3 or 4 different spots. I don't have that much an affinity, but I'm chasing to go to 3 or 4 different spots just to see fireworks.
No.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, July 5th, 2017.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Fortuitously, we have been given some breaking news just as we go to air. Bob McKenzie interrupts his vacation, which he was well-deserved because every hockey reporter in the first week of July, they need at least a couple, maybe 3 weeks of vacation. Right. But he reports, and there's going to be a press conference any moment now in Edmonton to announce the extension for Connor McDavid. The report last week was a amount of $13.25 million. According to McKenzie, that's been shaved by $750,000. So Connor McDavid will be making $12.5 million over 8 years. He is now the highest paid player in the NHL by $2 million over Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and Carey Price. Russ, what do you think of this deal?
Well, it's interesting. I just looked at what Wayne Gretzky made, and I want to say it was like $1.785 million. And if you sort of put it in one of those inflation calculators, it comes out to around $5 million, maybe $6 million. So literally half of what McDavid's getting a year because of where the league is at as far as revenue and corporate support and all of that. Wayne Gretzky made a lot of money outside of hockey anyhow, so I don't feel bad for him. I think McDavid's worth it. I just hope they didn't do it too soon, because if you do it too soon, then you do have trouble fielding a great team to try and win a Stanley Cup. He definitely left some money, on the table to be played around with. That's great. But did he leave enough? I don't know. Like, I just, at some point, I would rather see about, can you do deferred money? Do we know about that?
No.
You can't defer anything. So, you know what? If I were him, I would have signed a lesser deal for like 3 or 4 years and then said, then we'll sign the big deal. And I don't think he'd be hurting himself. I think he'd have plenty of money, and I think they would be able to build a winner. Now they're going to have a hard time.
Jan, there were two schools of thought. There was the 8-year max deal, and there was the Stamkos, Tavares, Kane, Taves method, which was 5 years, big money, but not significantly big money. But then you risk if you're Edmonton, McDavid having the opportunity to be a UFA at 25 or 26 years old and then being able to sign another 8-year deal like Kane and Taves did, like Stamkos did last year, like Tavares will do next year, and we'll talk about that in a second. What do you think of this deal, but what do you think of the ramifications of what's going to happen with Edmonton? Because I agree with Russ. I think it's going to hurt them a little bit in terms of flexibility.
As we've kind of seen, Edmonton historically, at least the last couple of years, have signed guys to longer-term deals way before they needed to. You look at RNH, you look at Jordan Eberle. Now they got out of the Eberle deal by dealing him for quote-unquote pennies on the dollar to get Ryan Strome. I mean, in this situation, yes, they've bought out several UFA years from McDavid, but he's going to be young enough when the 8 years end that he's going to probably get another huge deal depending on what the salary cap is. The $750,000 they saved clearly helps. They're going to have to sign Leon Draisaitl to a big deal. If they're going to already sign McDavid, you're going to talk to Draisaitl. There's been rumors, obviously, in the $9 to $10 million range for him as well. But, I mean, as I said, they need to be careful when it comes to some of these transactions. I mean, at the time, they thought when they signed Nugent Hopkins and Eberle, they made a brilliant transaction by getting guys young, locked up. Neither one of them have proven to be the case. McDavid, you would expect that he will live up to the contract, obviously depending on 4 years from now if the CBA, if we end up with a lockout. Draisaitl, you would expect the same, although there were questions that first year about him, less so than there were in terms of McDavid of what he'd end up becoming. So I'm not quite sure if Edmonton's done a particularly great job of managing their assets. They are a team you'd expect to continue to be on the rise, getting, their defense has gotten much better. Klefbom took a major step forward last year. The Larson trade ended up working out fairly well for them given what he became, not offensively but defensively. But in my opinion, is locking up guys for this many years for that much dollars just seems to be an unwise use of assets.
Well, okay, I mean, look at the situation this way. With the McDavid signing now, currently the Oilers have less than $6 million in cap space. That's not going to do it for Draisaitl. Even if they sign him on a 2-year bridge deal, he's probably going to get more than that, or at least demand more than that. The question is now, do they have to trade Ryan Nugent Hopkins? Because I think that's the only way they can get Draisaitl signed to a 8-year or maybe a 5-year.
They try and trade him already. That's the thing. I don't know how much trade value there is.
Well, let's rephrase that. Do they try to give him away?
No. I think, again, you're going to have to just sign Draisaitl to 3 to 5 years. That's it. And that's
do you think that they can get him on 3 to 5 years?
He has no choice. He's not going to hold out. He doesn't have any leverage.
He might. You never know. I mean, if he's demanding market value, Russ. I mean, because
you know what?
Well, I think the better question is, did they try to get rid of Mark Fane? I mean, that seems the guy from looking that could be the most expendable potentially. No, especially if Darnell Nurse is really healthy. You probably can make do with him not being there as your 5th or 6th D-man. Maybe there's a team that's out there that has some cap space that's looking to take on a 1-year guy.
Arizona, Vegas
a little bit of room to get rid of him.
Yeah, Arizona or Vegas, dumping ground.
You could trade to Arizona or Vegas for a pick. But the problem is, forgetting about Draisaitl, let's say you do lock him up. What's really going to have to happen here now in Edmonton is, and the clock has started, is their draft picks are really going to have to start coming through. And not just from the first round anymore, from a lot more than that. Because if it doesn't, they will never be able to build the winner that McDavid wants, because that's the reason Chicago was able to do what they did, because a lot of guys were able to get filtered in from the draft. If Edmonton can't do that, this will be a failure.
Well, go ahead, Jay.
They went that route. I mean, the selections of RNH and Eberle.
Yeah, but they changed over their staff.
You thought there were 2 guys who was going to be helped to build around. Now, I mean, Puyarvi is going to have to be the guy that really takes that major step forward, and maybe he has a Draisaitl type of year where he struggled his first year, but that second year he took a quantum leap and become the draft pick that they expected him to be.
Now, remember, McDavid still has a year left on his entry level, so this will kick in next July. But if you look at the Oilers right now, they've got 7 forwards that are RFA next year. Obviously, none as high a level as McDavid, but it's going to cost them to re-sign guys like Strome and Maroon. Patrick Maroon who has played really well with McDavid, and Maroon's
got no leverage either. Like if he wants to play on a good team, he'll sign for less. That's how it's going to have to work.
Even if he signs for less, Russ, it's going to cost them something. It's going to cost them significant money to sign him, and that's the thing. It's like they have a lot of long-term money. That's why Nugent Hopkins has got 4 more years at $6 million, and in a league, does Montreal? Montreal needs a center. Now there's your center. But he's not a number 1. But right now, is he better than Philip Deneau? Yeah. And is he better than Thomas Plekanec? Of course he is. Is he better than Galchenyuk or Drouin, who are wingers? Maybe.
So my problem is this. Draisaitl literally goes, and we've talked about this the other day, from entry level to maybe 8 or 9 million, and he's had one really great season. And this is a problem now within the system, within the structure of the NHL, because even me, who I don't begrudge any money for any players, would like to see a little bit more out of players before you have to really sink in that kind of money. And this is where Edmonton, look, they're going to make plenty of money. That's not the issue. It's just about building a winner. And this is where it makes it hard to build a winner now.
So based upon that rationale, then, in essence, your viewpoint seems to be that both guys, McDavid and Draisaitl, should have each probably signed 2 to 3 year bridge deals, keeping them as an RFA for at least a bit longer, and you can then afterwards lock them up to a 7-8 year deal if you want to, without impacting your salary structure.
Right. Yeah, because those would be the years you have a chance to buy big free agents and sort of go for it. You've got your franchise goalie. This is what the Leafs are trying to accomplish. This is really the only way, because once you start locking guys up to 8 years, you can't do more than 3 or 4.
Yeah,
the problem also, Mike, you can speak to this better than I can. I mean, you look at Toronto now. There are enough rumors that Matthews is going to be one of the next guys that get a big deal. You got to figure Mitch Marner is going to be looking for money. Nylander is going to be looking for money. In Buffalo, it's going to be Eichel. So, in essence, what Edmonton now has done has kind of set the system as to what it's going to be moving forward for all these young guys, that you don't get those couple of years lead-in, because everybody's going to want the big money, seeing that McDavid and Draisaitl have gotten it.
Well, it's still in the realm of possibility. I think in terms of guys like Matthews, and you can take the approach that I'll take the 5 years, I'll take good money. Say for example, next July, Austin Matthews and his representatives, I think it's Pat Brisson as his representative, says we don't want to sign an 8-year max deal, we want to sign a 5-year deal, and the Leafs will say, okay, well, we'll give you 9.5. There's the compromise. It's a shorter deal for less money. If you go 8 years with Austin Matthews, it's going to be over 10. It might be 11. He's not, if he has a year where he contends for the Hart Trophy, it's probably going to be close to what McDavid got. So,
here's the thing too, and this is something that we see in Major League Baseball, and we've seen it a little bit in basketball, but because they had that exemption, they had that baseline salary that a star can take. You don't see it as much. But in baseball, when a guy signs a certain level of salary, you can't really go anywhere else. Like, nobody's picking up that tab. So, like, for all these teams that say they're worried about, well, the next deal or whatever, it's like, you know what? If over the next 5 years, X amount of teams sign guys to 8-year deals, not that many teams would be able to afford Connor McDavid.
Right. Yeah, it's like Joey Votto signing in Cincinnati. Who's going to take that contract? Even though he's a great player, even though he has great years, he can't afford to pay $30 million a year or something ridiculous like that. So, but I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see the ripple effects of the McDavid contract on other situations. And one of them,
I don't think, you know what? I'll tell you this: I don't think it's going to affect the Leafs. Knowing Lou Lamoriello, I don't believe Austin Matthews will get this kind of contract this year. Now, maybe in the summer he will, but right now, this moment, he's not getting it just because Edmonton signed it. He's going to go the exact opposite route of the Edmonton Oilers. That's my prediction on Lou, and he is going to wait.
Well, I mean, Matthews and Marner come up next July because they're only after year one. Nylander can sign the extension now.
Yeah, they won't do it.
They won't do it. But I mean, that's the risk and reward here, Russ. you could get Nylander signed, and I'll just use this as an example. Use this as a ballpark figure. Say $6 million. You could get Nylander signed for $6 million for 6 years, but I don't think Lou will do that because he's only had one good year. He's going to say, "Okay, kid, show me."
Yep.
And if you show me, I'll show you the money.
Yep.
But,
and that's what he's doing with everybody, and I think that's the right way. That will be just because Edmonton sort of did it this way. I don't believe the rest of the league will with their young players.
Right, and Edmonton is like you go ahead.
Try to. You got to figure that the players are going to want to go that route, which then kind of creates some tension and disconnect between the teams. Lamoriello historically has been, I wouldn't say cheap, but he's been penurious with his money a little bit. Let's put it that way.
Well,
and it's probably going to be the same.
But who has he actually lost?
Yeah,
that's
but again, you have a lot of players who you have to deal with. You have Marner, you have Matthews, you have Nylander. You're going to have Brown down there, a couple of Hyman and Brown, who's going to want not huge money but decent money. Because you have so many young guys at once, you have to be smart in terms of how you disseminate that cash as well.
Yeah, let's think about this though. For all of the verbiage you want to use about Lou and how tight he is with his money, how many guys has he really lost? He lost Bobby Holik, who wasn't worth the money. He lost Malakoff, who wasn't worth the money.
And Gomez.
He lost Scott Niedermayer because they wouldn't pay him as much as
he finally lost Niedermayer. That was maybe the one guy.
And he lost guys like Gomez, but Gomez got overpaid.
Gomez didn't do anything.
Right.
But thank you for reminding us. We know.
But I'm just saying, so that's one great player that maybe Lou did the wrong thing with.
Yeah.
One.
But this is the thing. Toronto loses $20 million in salary cap after this year. JVR, Komarov, Bozak, a couple other significant players. Now, they're going to have to replace those guys, obviously, but they're losing, a good chunk of salary there. So that gives them the flexibility. Plus, Lou was, picayunish with his money in New Jersey because the ownership was picayunish. So there's money to spend in Toronto, and they've done it, and they've done it well, and they've done it often. So I don't think that that's going to be a problem there. It's just going to be the judgment of how much you pay these guys, and if, like Russ said with Nylander, they're going to make them prove it. They're going to make them earn their money. But
the other end of the spectrum, the one end of the spectrum is, do you pay Nylander $6 million a year at the beginning of his career, and then the other end of the spectrum is, do you pay Marleau over $6 million a year at the end of his career? Like, that's where you have to start. That's where studies need to happen to see when it's worth it for a team to do it or not.
Right, and we're going to talk about this a little later because what the signing of Marleau was, I think, was part one of a two-pronged move. They signed Marleau. Right now they're over the cap, but they can go 10% over. Right. But it makes no sense to sign Marleau if you're not going to trade a guy like JVR to get defense, because that's the area. If they're truly trying to contend for a Stanley Cup in the next 2 years, they can't do it with Ron Hainsey as on their second defensive pairing. So they're going to have to make that move, and I think that's what they did. Is we're going to replace JVR with Marleau. We've got him locked up for 3 years. JVR can leave after a year, and we need to get something for him now while we still have the asset. So, okay. One of the ripple effects from McDavid could be the contract negotiations with John Tavares. Arthur Staple in Newsday today mentioned that the Islanders and Tavares have not even started contract negotiations, and as of July 1st, they could have extended him. Jan, I think the Islanders are really in trouble here because based on the building situation, based on what they haven't done since the end of the season, John Tavares has no reason to stay there if they don't show him some direction or some idea of what they're going to do.
Well, I think that's the key word you just mentioned, is the term direction, right? I mean, from what we saw, I think with Staple and a couple others wrote, is Tavares seems to be waiting, one, to get a better sense as to where the Islanders are going to play after next year with all the issues associated with the Barclays Center right now, and B, secondly, what direction the team is going in given the lack of movement this year at all in free agency. Some of the other transactions they made, I personally happen to like the Eberle deal. I think it'll probably play better with Tavares. They've got a history together. Sure. I like Anders Lee. I like some of the other things. Granted, their number one goalie of the future, Sorokin, is now staying in the KHL for 3 more years. But Tavares wants to know the direction. Dick McDavid actually taking a little less may help them also as well, because when all the rumors came out that he was going to get $13.25 million, a lot of the chatter and talk was that Tavares should be in the 11 or so range. Maybe this helps him a little bit, but if the Islanders don't get their direction determined in terms of A, where they're going to play, and B, what they're going to do with this team moving forward, the longer this goes with Tavares, the less likely he's going to come back. And maybe he goes to July 1 next year, he goes through that negotiating period, has all the conversations with everybody else, and comes back. But you don't want to take the risk with your number one center. And if they lose him, that team is bereft of a ton of upper-end talent, and they're going to be a shell of what they were, and try moving elsewhere when you don't have your number one center there and the guy who's the face of your franchise.
I'll say this. It's twofold now. So the first fold is I have Linus Soderstrom as their top-rated goalie. I never had Sorokin, and I think the organization now, based on the fact that he signed a 3-year deal, probably feels the same way. Whether that's right, we'll find out, right? But they do have a goalie of the future. I don't think Tavares is worried about the goalie. He's worried about everything else, like you said. I think they have until August. Like they're probably looking to do one more deal where they could at least say, okay, this is our finished product. They don't want to go to him today because today they're marginally better than they were yesterday. And John Tavares probably wants to see them be a lot better. Now, in August, if they do meet with them, are they really going to let the media know? Probably not. I don't think Arthur Staple will know. I don't think anybody will know. Because at that point, some point they will meet this summer, and at some point John Tavares will lean towards letting them know whether he's staying or not. And if not, they're not going to let the cat out of the bag if he's going to be available for trade
right
at the trading deadline. But they'll know. And that's the thing. We won't know probably months into the season because John Tavares doesn't talk about these things. He's been very good, and he's been a good soldier there.
Yep. Well, the question is, say for example, they hold contract negotiations in August, and things don't go well. Why would they wait until the deadline? Why wouldn't you just trade them now?
Because they're trying to compete for the playoffs too. Like they have to see where they're at.
Yeah, but they have to maximize the return for Tavares because I mean it's
if you trade him in September, you may be giving away points in the the regular season points you need. If you trade him at the deadline, at least you're only giving him up for a couple months. You'll get something for it, but they need the playoff revenue too. They're in a spot where playoff revenue is important and getting assets for him important. You'll still get assets for him, but if you trade him at the beginning of the year, you're not getting back what you want, and then you might not even be a playoff team.
Michael, who's showing up at the Barclays Center if they got rid of John Tavares now?
Right.
I mean, that's the problem. I mean, in my opinion, what's going to happen is Tavares probably to a certain extent likes the youth on this team. We, look at Ryan Pulak, Del Cal, Hosang, Barzell. There's a lot of big names that have yet necessarily to have either the opportunity or have shown the ability to pan out. Now, I don't think last year Capuano did a great job of utilizing the youth on this team. I think Doug Waite's going to have to do a much better job of playing a lot of the young guys on this team to see what they have. Now, if the guys like Hosang and Barzell and Del Cal and Pulak can show themselves to be reasonable NHLers at a minimum, but also start maybe living up to that draft status they had, maybe it makes it easier for them to sell Tavares on the future direction, knowing you have 4 young kids along with Eberle and Lee and all the other guys that are there. It makes it a bit more palatable to try to get him to stay. Or if he does go, the fan base gets energized by the young guys, and you can sell it that you're building off these young guys even if you lose Tavares.
I think that's fair.
Okay, now we're 5 days into free agency, or 4 days into free agency. Yeah, 4 or 5. And all the big names are gone. We have Radulov, we have Marlowe, Thornton re-signs in San Jose, Shattenkirk. All the big names are gone. Here is where a lot of teams, when the music stops, they have to face a big decision. And that's, do we tap into this secondary free agent market and try to, piece things together, or do we have to trade? And I'll use Montreal as the example. Montreal didn't get themselves a center. They maybe they step back into the Matt Duchene thing, but right now, when the music stopped, they flipped their number 1 defensive prospect for Jonathan Drouin, who's not a center, he's a winger.
But they're going to make him a center. We know they are.
Well, that's not for sure yet, Russ.
Oh, it's for sure. They're not going to talk about it, but you'll see magically they're going to try it.
My view as well. I think he's going to be a center.
How stupid. I mean,
I don't think
honestly,
it's the right move, but they're clearly leaning that way.
I think the Montreal Canadiens have had possibly the worst offseason of any team. And I'm biased here because I'm not a big fan of the Montreal Canadiens, but they have had a horrific offseason. The decision to trade Sergachev for Durant, fine, Durant's a French-Canadian player and he's a talent, and I get that, but they didn't solve their center situation. I think they're defensively. I think they're worse.
No, they're not worse defensively.
I really think they're worse.
I don't think so. I think if you want to say they don't have as many points on the blue line, that's fine. Are they better actually defensively? Yeah, they're better. I think they're a better defensive club than last year. I think they're going to make Drouin a center at some point after he gets used to the team, and we'll see where it works out. I mean, listen, if Jonathan Drouin turns into a 70-point guy this year, that's a heck of a trade. And then nobody's going to say anything, and then nobody's going to complain about where the scoring is for Montreal. So I'm not gonna jump on the Canadiens just yet.
Now, if they do sign Galchenyuk, then there is your replacement for Radulov as a winger.
Oh, I think they are going to sign him. I think at this point, with everything the way it's broken, they're signing him.
Okay, but well, before we get into the secondary free agent market, I wanted to ask about the Rangers because there's been a few moves in the last couple of days. I figured let you guys debate them. Jesper Fast signs a 3-year deal today, $1.85 million per. That's I think a decent.
We're not going to debate that. That's a great.
No. I think that's a decent number for a decent player.
I had projected 3 years between 1.75 and 2 mil for him. So
right down the middle.
Given what he does for that team, perfect bottom six forward, a guy who can play on the penalty kill, trusted late in games on the ice. So a guy that I thought they had to bring back.
But the David Desharnais signing, I mean, David Desharnais was not liked in Montreal. They shipped him off to Edmonton. He scored a couple goals in the playoffs.
One goal in the playoffs.
I thought he was 2.
One goal, like 3 assists.
And one big goal late in an overtime game for Edmonton.
Okay, but
so 1 year more goal than Kevin Hayes. We'll give him that.
Ooh, 1 year, $1 million for Desharnais, and I get the feeling, Russ, you weren't happy.
No, I mean, because here's the thing. It's not so much the guy, it's what it represents. They already had lost Eric Stepan. They already have trouble in the middle. They know Fast isn't going to play for a couple months. And so they needed to get a bigger center for the fourth line, not a smaller guy. I'm not against the smaller guys. You've got 3 huge centers, and he's going to be your speed guy, the guy who causes problems. That's fine. But the Rangers use a fourth line like every other line, and teams are going to match up against that line. He is not a defensive specialist. He's pretty good on faceoffs. He is like 51%. That's fine. He hasn't scored a lot of points in the last 12 months, and I don't think he's going to last very long. I think he is a temporary fix. But the problem is this goes back to the same thing as Brandon Peary last year. Everybody says, oh, Brandon Peary's low cost. Okay, great. It's low cost. But then they underutilized him anyhow because Brandon Peary barely saw the ice for like the last 3 quarters of the season. I don't like these 1 year, $1 million guys because they're just too easy for Alain Vigneault to cast off, and then it causes a problem in the lineup every day. And I think ultimately this will cause a problem in their lineup for a while until they figure it out.
Are they just trying to find the next Michael Grabner, find some cheap guy for $1 million or $750,000 and hope he scores 25 goals?
They had that in Benoit Pouliot a couple of years ago, who actually was pretty good that 1 year and parlayed.
He had like 20 goals.
Big-time contract with Edmonton, and he's one of the guys I would have liked back for a year. I mean, there's a couple of guys I would have liked. One was Pouliot, who got 1 year, $1.15 million from Buffalo. I thought he would have been a nice guy. Second guy I really wanted was Scotty Hartnell. I thought Hartnell for $1 million would an absolutely perfect acquisition for that team, an agitative fourth-line guy. Mm-hmm. He was another one of those guys. So there was a couple of guys that I really liked. I think I'll remember later there was one other guy that went for like $1 million that I thought. My view on Desharnais, it's an okay signing. It's not the guy I wanted. As you said, though, a lot of the big names are gone. There wasn't a ton of other guys I thought they were going to get down the middle to try to fill that role, given who kind of went and what some of the salaries were. One guy I would like to see them sign, especially given the buyout, is UC Jokinen. I think Jokinen's got a little bit left in the tank. He's a little bit better offensively. Maybe not. He's not a checking winger, but a pretty good third-line center potentially. A guy who's gotten a pedigree of scoring in the past. He would have been one of those guys I would have liked to maybe added on. I know it's some talk about Mikhail Grigorenko as another guy that came up, but I know a lot of people are very down and rightly so on him. But the Rangers still have a hole there. I do think eventually they will end up trying to go the trade route. There probably are teams that have centers who got 1 year left on their deal. The big name that I've seen a lot, and Russ, and especially Michael, you could talk about him, is Tyler Bozak. That's a name I've seen thrown about a lot with Toronto's depth there, and there may be need for a blue liner. Maybe there's a type of a match that the two teams can have there, but I don't think the Rangers are done. But given what Jeff Gordon has done this year in terms of adding Shattenkirk, adding Pavelec, though I would have gone for less than $1.3 million for him, though. The viewpoint is the goaltending whisperer, Benoit Allaire, will kind of turn him around a little bit. Adding Shattenkirk on a deal that was extremely team-friendly, but mainly because Shattenkirk took less money in term to be here. And then you had a guy like Desharnais in a pretty solid signing and fast. The only guy that's still left, obviously, is Mika Zibanejad to see if he gets a bridge deal or a longer-term deal. And once Kevin Klein retires, there will still be enough money out there to try to add another forward or center.
Here's the thing. This is the worry now. With the way the lineup is, with the lack of talent out there, with the Rangers sort of, going for other guys first, we don't even know if they went heavy on Bonino. I would have liked Bonino there.
Not at that money.
No, I agree. But we don't know if they even tried.
4 years.
No, listen, I agree with you on the money, but we don't know if they even tried to lure him.
Yep.
That'd be the interesting thing, because they could have had Shattenkirk call him and say, hey, why don't you come over before you sign with Nashville? Like, we don't know. But the point is, all this does is sort of make me wonder if Elias Anderson comes in and they invite him into pro camp, if he looks good, if they're not going to be tempted, because he already has a pro body and he's probably further along than some of the other centers in this draft. I hope that's not the case, but I can't say it's out of the question now.
Well, Russ, here's my concern, and this name will resonate very well with you, Manny Malhotra.
Yeah.
They rushed Malhotra years ago and stunted his development. My concern here is Anderson may very well be ready, but again, putting that much pressure on an 18-year-old coming from overseas also, to my opinion, that's not a wise use in terms of a guy who's drafted.
Listen, I agree with you.
Let him develop. If he makes it, wonderful. If not, you need other options. And as you talked about Jesper Fast being out, you need other options available also, because Fast is going to be there. Now, maybe Paul Carey, who you signed, is a guy you use a little bit early on. Maybe a Colt Schneider is another guy, but I'm not in love with necessarily that transaction occurring.
No.
Well, you mentioned Bozak, and I'll just say from the Toronto perspective, they're not. I mean, you would think from the outside looking in, they've got Matthews, they've got Kadri, they've got Bozak, that they're deep up the middle. The organization after that has absolutely nothing. That's why they had to sign Dominic Moore as a fourth-line center. Ben Smith was not an answer as a fourth-line guy. Freddie Gauthier is going to be out until November or December, and they had to stock the Marlies with a bunch of AHL centers just to have guys up the middle. So they really don't have enough strength. If they trade Bozak, and there's going to be a move here. There's going to be a second corresponding move with the Leafs to get a defenseman. But if they move Bozak, they would have to move Marleau to the middle. Marleau hasn't played in the middle in, I think, 3 or 4 years. And I think they want Marleau to play with Matthews. I think they want him to play on that number one line. So that would mix things up a lot more.
I'll tell you a move they could do, which they may try. We don't know if they won't. Maybe they try and lure Will Butcher there, and if they do, then maybe they could trade Nick Holden and get that extra center that they really could use, because Nick Holden has a little bit of value now that he had 11 goals. I'd be more than happy to let him go if they got Will Butcher.
Well, I think even if you don't get Butcher, we've talked about moving Holden in general because of all the depth on the blue line. The other guy I just recognized who I really wanted him to sign, I thought was a nice good addition, Mike Camilleri for $1 million for 1 year to L.A. I thought he might have been a decent third-line winger.
$1 million I'd have been okay with it.
For that team as well, in terms of as a guy who's, when he's healthy, has shown the ability to score. The problem is he never stays healthy, and that's kind of the bigger issue there. So
with the way that defense is being pursued in free agency and in the trade market, there will be 29 teams interested in Will Butcher. The only one is that won't be is the team that he won't go to, which is the team that drafted him and jilted him. So
yeah, and even if not, Rangers don't have to go that route, because even with Holden, now it's Shattenkirk, you got your top four. Yeah. You got Anthony DeAngelo, you've added. You got Pionk, you got Kampfer. You have Bereglazov in the minors.
I'm not counting on Kampfer. I'll be honest.
Look, my opinion, Russ, and you know my view on this. There's two things I would have done. One, I never would have let Marek Rivik go, because I thought Rivik would have been a nice guy to add.
He could have been a fourth-line guy.
The big center the Rangers may go with, Boo Neves may get a shot at that fourth-line center.
All right, here's the thing about Nieves. So he's a great skater. He's not that physical, and I don't think there's that much dimension to his game. I think that's the problem. I think that's why he looked good in college, because of the speed got him by. I don't know if Bunievis is really going to fill that bill. I would be shocked if he did.
Well, and the other guy, one of them was they should have retained Clendening. They should have. He was an RFA. They just should have offered him, qualified him for arbitration. I know AV doesn't like him, but at $650,000, he would have been a nice guy to have, because it would have given you some additional depth if you needed it.
Well, all I can say is that, and I have no inside source on this, but based on their success rate when it comes to college free agents, and based on their need right now on the blue line, I think the leading candidate for Will Butcher is going to be the Chicago Blackhawks, because after they trade Yarmulson and they lose Van Riemsdyk, he could be on their second defensive pairing.
Here's what Nieves did last year. He had 18 points in 40 games, 10 PIMs, a -7. I mean, the team was bad, so I won't kill him on the plus-minus. But like 18 points in the AHL with all the ice time he's able to get, he's not ready.
Okay, I just want to go through these, because what I think right now is there's that, like I said, there's that secondary free agent market where teams now will look at the landscape and say, okay, can this guy help me, even if it's at reduced dollars, or do we need to go out and make a trade? The Carolina Hurricanes are a team right now that I think are going to be in trade mode, because they add Trevor Van Riemsdyk. They're loaded on defense. They got 6 defensemen under the age of 25 at the NHL level, plus they have Jake Bean and Hayden Fleury. So they're stacked on defense. But they don't have enough offense right now. Even with the addition of Kruger, even with the addition of Justin Williams, to make the playoffs, I don't think they have enough offense. So I think Ron Francis, probably before the season, is going to trade one of those defensemen to get some more scoring.
I don't know about that. I mean, Aho has more points to give, and I think he'll give them this year. They picked up that kid Sorella from the Rangers. He may be a guy they could plug in this year and get some points out of.
Yeah, don't remind me about that trade.
I know.
Really well.
Listen, it hurts me to say it, but I have to say it because he's there. And
look, they got a lot of young kids. I mean, Sarala, Aho, all the young guys they got. I mean, Williams. The only question I have for Williams is the term and the dollars. Given his age, $4.5 million seemed to be a healthy cap hit. And
no, that's fine. I can live with that.
I
cap room. I mean, as you said, Michael, I think they're going to deal a defenseman, but the problem is they have been talking about dealing a defenseman for so long. When do you stop talking and actually just deal somebody?
I'll tell you when. Well, if they see Hayden Fleury looks good in camp, then they can do it.
I think they have, Russ, I think they have to do it before then, because you've got 5 of those defensemen who are RFA next year. You cannot.
Yeah, but I could do it in camp. I got to see what Fleury looks like before I'm ready to put him in the lineup. But if I can put that monster in the lineup, then I'll trade somebody.
Okay.
Right. Now, who are you dealing? Is it Hannafin the guy you're dealing, or is it Falk the guy you're dealing?
I can't tell you, only because I'm not privy to their contract negotiations. But if they've already gotten the gist that Hannafin's not going to sign there long term, then they're going to have to trade Hannafin. But I don't know. I don't know how that shakes out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think they're going to keep the guys like Pesci and
those guys are
because they'll be to re-sign them. It won't cost them a lot. But Hannafin, 5th pick in the draft, makes the NHL at 18 years old. He's probably going to expect. I don't, with everybody else signing long-term deals, he's probably going to want a long-term deal, but maybe they don't want to sign him to a long-term deal. We'll see. But okay, look at the secondary market right now. And I'm not going to throw out the Brooks Likes and the Mark Streits, but the guys who still have something left and can contribute. Andrei Markov. It does not look like he's going back to Montreal. Montreal has got to spend their money on Galchenyuk and probably finding some more offense. Markov was asking for $6 million over 2 years. There was talk about him approaching Philadelphia. Apparently, Philadelphia.
I just don't think his agent's doing a good enough job, Mike. I think that's what it is.
He's his own agent, Russ.
I know.
But the question is now, can he go back to Montreal? Will pride kick in here, and he goes back to Montreal hat in hand and tries to get a 1-year deal? I think they've already walked away from him. And I don't see him getting a 2-year deal at 38 years old, even though he had a great year last year.
Somebody will get a 1-year deal when all of a sudden somebody comes up lame just before training camp, and they say, "Oh, we need a player," and then they'll call Markov and Markov will cut a deal for himself. It's just ridiculous. This reminds me when Felix Unger was his own lawyer on The Odd Couple. It didn't work out well. He represented himself in court. It didn't work out well. Go watch the episode. If
you're a team like, say, for example, now remember, he's played for Montreal since 2000, so he hasn't won a cup. Pittsburgh could use a defenseman, but I don't know if they have the cap room. Washington, same thing. Chicago, he could go to any of these places that have a legitimate chance to win a Stanley Cup, but probably he would have to sign a 1-year deal for $3 to $4 million. If I was those teams, I would be inquiring on that. But do you think that that's what's going to happen?
I don't think Chicago's got that cap room, unless depending on what happens with Hossa.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Hossa, he's going to probably go on long-term injury.
If they can.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, I would think so.
Oh, you would think so. Okay. Dennis, okay. Jerome McGinley. Is Jerome McGinley done? Or does
he's
not
done.
Out there?
No way.
Is there a team out there that's going to give Jerome
Absolutely.
McGinley?
Somebody will sign Jerome McGinley. They're just trying to get everything else done, and then they're going to just offer him what they got left. But he will get a deal in the next week or two.
He didn't look particularly good last year, that's for sure. I love McGinley, but I'm not sure how much he's got left.
Was it the best situation for him? I don't know.
Why do I have this weird feeling he's going to go back to Calgary to end his career?
What about Dallas?
Well, he was drafted by Dallas, and they're looking.
Dallas when the Joe Nieuwendyk deal. Dallas is, in my opinion, Dallas has had one of the better off seasons. They have a really good shot. I think. Personally, I still think they need one more blue line or a defensive defenseman to really take that next step. But you can get McGinley, pop him on the power play on first or second unit, and shelter his minutes, and it might not be a bad addition to that team.
Well, Hamhuis had a really good year for them last year, and they got Mathot, so I think they're okay on defense now.
I still think they need. I mean, if Julius Honka takes that step forward, and obviously the viewpoint is Mathot's going to pair with John Klingberg and be, like Carlson was to him, same type of relationship. I still think they need another blue liner, in my opinion.
Okay. Dennis Weidman, we know the situation in Calgary. He's 34 years old. He still can skate. He's a right-hand shot. I think somebody's going to take a chance on him simply because right-hand shot defenseman. And
he's a September-October signing, I think.
You don't think that's something that somebody will?
Not over the summer. I think they'll wait and see if somebody comes up lane. He'll get a call.
They'll wait for the number to go down.
Yeah, they'll wait for the number to go down, and he'll wait for the opportunity to arise.
What about Cody Franzen?
Well, this directly links to Toronto, because it's conceivable that Toronto can keep Van Riemsdyk or Bozak and add a defenseman. They'll just be right up against the cap. But the question is, how much does your defense improve if your answer to add is Dennis Weidman, Roman Polak, or Cody Franzen? And my argument is not that much. So that's why I think there's something bigger afoot here. Is that they're gonna flip one of those forwards for a defenseman. I don't think. I mean, I like Roman Polak. He's a tough bottom pairing guy. He's not a top four guy. He's not suited for that bigger role. I mean, maybe in a playoff scenario where the minutes are tougher, sure. Cody Franzen had 2 really bad years in Buffalo, and he's not going to get power play time in Toronto. And that was one of his main pluses was power play time. And I don't see
one quick thing I want to update. I don't know if you saw of the $100 million contract Connor McDavid got, $86 million is a signing bonus.
Well, okay, and let's go because we can talk about these free agents.
Well, hold on. I want to finish on the free agents real quick.
Okay.
Because there's still a few guys. It's interesting. We saw Nail Yakupov get signed, right, by Colorado.
Really cheap contract too.
I think that's a good signing because
I think that's a great signing because they have nothing to lose other than to give him top 6 minutes. Put him with McKinnon and let him play.
Yep.
And see what you got.
Absolutely. Why not? I mean, you're putting him in essence, really a no-lose situation.
Yeah. Now, the speculation out there is that there's a lot of interest in UC Jokinen being bought out by Florida. I think the price point's gonna be
that'll be key.
Yeah, that'll be key. But there's been talk about him going back to Pittsburgh. There's been
still can play on the power play, still can play defense, still could play in the shootout, and still can get you points.
And he can play up the middle, apparently, still. I mean, I always thought of him mostly as a winger, but they're saying he can play center, too. And
he can play a little center. I mean, Jokinen, I think, will be a guy that gets signed. Look, I mean, if you're a team that's just been abysmal in the shootout and you lost points on that last year, you bring him in, that instantly makes you a shootout contender now. So I think he'll get signed. I don't think that's a big problem. But you're right. There's not a lot of guys left. It's interesting that Kovalchuk took his rubles and went home. We kind of thought that was his main plan, but he was still sort of kicking the tires.
And there's a lot of speculation that he got a little arm twisting to stay. Somebody that came out that it may not have been his first choice. But the other thing is the Devils were trying to get a deal, and we talked about this a couple of times. I mean, next year he'll be a free agent, can go anywhere, but he'll be over 35.
Yes, Vlad the Impaler apparently decided to do a little arm twisting. The question is, though, next year, will that happen again? I mean,
see, the Devils probably should have traded his rights for like a 6th-round pick and called it a day.
I'll tell you one thing, though. If you think that he's going to get more interest now because they didn't have to make a trade with New Jersey, next year that contract's a 35 and over contract.
I know.
I think he's getting a 1-year deal.
Yeah.
Well, if he wants $6.5 million a year, he's going to be looking for a while because I don't think anybody's giving him that kind of money.
Right. Vanek is the last one. Thomas Vanek, somebody will sign, but I think it is a matter of money, and he's going to have to just agree to take less or maybe take a incentive-laden contract. Like that's what he's going to have to deal.
I could be wrong, but based on the fact that they traded to get Jason Pominville back, I would not be shocked to see Thomas Vanek come back to Buffalo.
And then they would deal him at the trade deadline again.
They could
to the Islanders.
Nobody mentioned was Shane Doan, and I personally think if Doan's smart, he hangs it up and moves into the front office for Arizona and calls it a career.
Well, okay, and last one is Yager. I mean, it's entertaining all this tweet stuff, but the question is this just a desperate attempt to get attention, to get somebody to kick the tires on him?
No, he's just being himself. He is.
I mean, he apparently, Florida, it's not going to happen. Will New Jersey? Will Vegas?
No, New Jersey won't do it again, but there'll be a team. Could it be Vancouver? Could it be? There's a team that would definitely take Yager.
Could it be Edmonton?
First half, he totally declined in that second half, but he's the kind of guy that you can still use him on the power play.
Yeah.
He's an offensive force. I mean, he's a guy who's going to bring some people in the seats to come watch him, so he's going to help your attendance. And I still think he's got
players along. He does do that.
He's got a little bit left. I think he's got a little bit left in the tank. I don't think he's totally done, but he's approaching that done status.
Oh yeah.
Last thing, just on what Jan updated us on the signing bonus, because we saw that with Carey Price and we've seen it with other contracts. This is going to be a bone of contention with the new CBA, the heavy signing bonus, because it makes buyouts impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm sure the teams are gonna do this because they can it's beneficial to them to get these players, but it's not circumvention, but I think
let's go around the panel here. Are you doing that for Draisaitl? I'm not.
It's pure salary cap circumvention and no ifs, ands, or buts.
But are you doing it for Draisaitl, Jan? Are you going to?
Well, again, the question is how much. Well,
it doesn't matter. Whatever the amount is, are you going to give him 75%?
The risk involved with Draisaitl is a lot more than the risk involved with McDavid, and I'm not giving him that much cash as a guarantee, basically that I'm giving you that cash right up front.
Me neither.
What they may do, and what may be the compromise when the new CBA is negotiated, is a cap on how much. Maybe 50%, maybe 30%. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to cap the amount of signing bonus you can put in a contract.
I tell him he can go get a loan from the Bank of McDavid, but this is what you're going to get out of us, and that's it.
Yeah, and my opinion is I think, Michael, you're going to see a lot more than just a cap. I'm going to tell you that the NHL is going to start with and saying all of these signing bonuses are included for cap purposes, and they're no longer buyout proof, and that's what's going to be the bone. I've tweeted a bunch of times. This is going to be that major bone of contention and what's going to cause the wedge to start or continue the cut process towards the CBA and a lockout. You're going to see the next couple of years exactly the same happen on
these will be
contract.
grandfathered in, Jen. They won't be able to do anything about it.
No, we'll be able to do anything for the ones now, but going forward, they're going to be no. Well, again, we can't say that because look what they did to deals during the last one. We saw what happened there.
Yeah, I mean the cap recapture situation. I mean that's detrimental to teams' caps. I mean, you know, you're going to see Shea Weber traded back to Nashville at the end of his career just to avoid the cap recapture.
Right.
Likely.
Here's what I think will happen. I think that'll be one carrot, and the other carrot will be, hey, do you want compliance buyouts again? Well, then you can't do this. It'll be like that'll be it. Because unfortunately, the league always has to save the owners, and they always have to save them from themselves. And so there's always going to be something. And so, Jan, it'll be one or the other, I think.
Yep. I think we're looking at if the owners and the player association were smart, and we know neither one of them are right now, they would start the ball rolling on conversations earlier rather than later to avoid another lockout. They can ill afford both sides a lockout, especially on matters such as these, where you could probably come up and reach an accord sooner rather than later.
And they very well might.
But to get to another lockout after what happened last time, and especially now with the interest level rising all over again, like we saw previously, I just think it's going to be quote unquote a death knell if they go through this whole routine again.
Yeah, I think both sides realize that, and I think that there'll be shots across the bow, and they might miss preseason games. But if they're going to eat into the regular season,
I'm sure season ticket holders would be very upset if there were no preseason games.
Yeah, they'll
just like the NFL, right?
Yeah,
they'll be devastated. Okay, guys, good show. We will be back tomorrow, hopefully at 1 p.m. Eklund should be with us. For Jan Levine, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.